Okay, I call this meeting to order. It is 7:02 on Monday, February 4th, and this is a regular meeting of the Richfield School Board. In attendance this evening, we have board members Paula Cole, Peter Tensing, John Ashmead, Tim Paulus, Christine Malik, and I am Crystal Brackey. We have Superintendent Unowski at the table and may be joined by our two student board members as the evening goes on. We will certainly strive to remain focused on Richfield Public Schools' mission statement as we conduct our meeting this evening, and want to extend a special thank you to all of you who are here, given the skating rink-like conditions. And also, I was sharing this earlier, just want to appreciate our buildings team, because I feel like we always have the safest and best sidewalks leading to our entryways. So our first item of business on the agenda is to approve the agenda before us. And as you may have heard us talking about, it is certainly a shorter agenda than is typical for us, in part because of the unexpected days off last week due to extreme cold. And so we just did not have an opportunity to shift things. So this could be an unusually short meeting this evening, but we are so excited to have our special guest from the Richfield STEM School to kick things off this evening. But with all of that preamble, is anyone prepared to move the agenda as presented?
I would move the brief agenda as presented.
Second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Ms. Cole. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the agenda is approved. So we are moving into the information and proposals section of the agenda, with which this evening begins with our superintendent update and our very special guest from the Richfield STEM School. Would you like to introduce the team from STEM?
Absolutely. So I'm excited to have Principal Winter step to the microphone. She has a team, it looks like, of 6 people here joining her who will be participating, or at least here present for the presentation related to STEM. So with that, I'm excited to hear from Principal Winter and the team at STEM.
I'm bringing them all up, so. I told them they can, have their parents watch it online. So
This
they
is
can
true.
see them on the video. So, well, thank you so much for having us. I appreciate having a few minutes to share a little bit of the work that we're doing over in the STEM building. So my team here, and we got a great picture of all of us. So this is my team here. I have Cindy Liebeck, I have Casey Swenson, I have Andrew Onishi, and I have Darcy Sarazine. And they each play kind of different roles in some of the work that we're going to share today, and I'm going to have them just talk a little bit about their lens as we go through our presentation. So one of the big concepts about this presentation and questions that we wanted to answer is, how do we support individual students' needs and prepare students for learning? And in particular, focusing around some of the strategic plan goals of how do we accelerate achievement for all students, and how to engage family and community members as partners. And so what I would say is, this is my second year at the STEM building, and 2 kind of key things that have kind of come out in my learning as I've gotten to know the building a little better. The first thing is, I would say, is that our families have really been doing a great job of getting our students ready for school at those primary levels, at the kindergarten level. And so during my time, as I've gotten to know our students and our families, what we've started noticing is that our students are coming in really knowing a lot of the key concepts in kindergarten. And so when you think about the progression of their learning through kindergarten, some of the concepts they've already mastered, they already know that. And so definitely as a team here, we had to have some conversations of, if these students already know that information, how are we going to continue to support their learning through the kind of continuum throughout kindergarten and also throughout K-5. The second kind of a little bit of information that I really was reflecting on is I attended a conference actually with Darcy, and it's a Gifted and Talented National Conference. It was hosted here this year. And a lot of the speakers were talking about what we ask our accelerated learners or our high achieving students to accelerate and do, and what do we need to do to backfill and support our students and all students around those skills when we want them to move and when they're ready to move. And so we had a lot of conversations at the building level of how do we support all of our learners at those younger ages so that when we do ask them to move faster or to have them understand deeper concepts, they're ready to do that. And it's not that we haven't prepared them enough. So this presentation is really kind of encompassing some of these needs that we identified at the building and our responses to those needs. So the first thing we're gonna highlight a little bit is really how do we support all of our students? And one of the, as I was collaborating with some other educators, one of the pieces was a supplemental curriculum called PETS, Primary Education Thinking Skills. And it's a supplemental curriculum that really pushes our students to experience high-level problem solving using convergent, divergent, visual, and evaluative thinking. And so it really is exposing them to some of these concepts beginning at kindergarten. One of the key points around this curriculum is it consists of 12 total lessons for students to experience from a whole class lens. And all the students experience this. And then it integrates really nicely into our current curriculum that we're currently using. So I'm gonna bring Casey up here. Casey is one of my kindergarten teachers. She graciously piloted this. I started very small before expanding out to other grade levels. And she did this with her kindergarten group, and these are just some examples of student work, and she'll kind of talk through that.
So for this, it's all about creative thinking and being an inventor. So the book that we read is called 10 Black Dots, and they have to take dots and make them into something, anything that they'd like, is the first piece of it. And then the next day we read a book called Curious George ABCs, and in the book, there's a different thing for each letter, but the letter A is made into an alligator mouth, and the letter B is made into a butterfly. So then they took their thinking from the 10 black dots and Curious George's ideas, and they had to make something out of black dots and a letter. So I gave them the dots and the letters. They decided what they wanted to make, drew it, and then labeled it. So the one here is 14 black dots and the letter I, make an igloo, and 13 black dots and the letter O, make an octopus. So it shows kind of their creative thinking. They were encouraged not to do one from the book and think of something on their own, and they did great.
I know this better.
Oh, yeah.
We have to be very special people.
So the second thing that we wanted to highlight was our students who were ready to move beyond our normal curriculum. And what we have is we have a K-5 enriched math model. And the way I explain it to our families is that we take our grade level curriculum and we compact it down. And then we add these supplemental units that go really deep on key concepts. And I share this with the families to explain that we want to better prepare them for middle school, that if they are ready to accelerate and they're ready to move faster, they're able to do that because they have a full depth of understanding around these key math concepts. So we are not necessarily focusing on making them move faster. We want them to have a full depth of knowledge around math. And so we describe it as an enriched math program. The curriculum that we are using, it's called Project M Cubed and M Squared. The M squared is for a K2 lens and M cubed is for a 3-5 lens. So it's the same curriculum, it's just based on the grade level. And it's a series of supplemental units. And the Project M2 fosters inquiry and engages students in critical thinking, problem solving, and communication, focusing on geometry, measurement, and number, content, and process. The Project M Cubed introduces advanced math content and focuses on critical and creative problem solving and reasoning. And so Andrew teaches it at the 5th grade level, and Casey teaches it at the kindergarten level. And then I've had both Darcy and Cindy really supporting the whole team at all of the grade levels and making sure that we're implementing it well and that it also makes sense from a K-5 lens. Key points here is that there's verbal and written mathematical communication, which are really key components in all of the lessons. Also, deeper thinking and learning through talk, written, and use of mathematical language. And then they also talk how it's important to connect it to the real world experiences and teaching students content, encouraging them to think and act like mathematicians. Key things that you'll see in the curriculum is that the lessons will start with a whole class investigation. They will then push into small groups and discussions. They will debrief as a whole class. And then they have kind of a processing at the end of the lesson that they coin Think Deeply. And it's an opportunity for them to provide written and verbal processing over their learning. The other thing that I would say is we also worked as a team with Mike Wallace on the work he's doing at the middle school and making sure that we are supporting and scaffolding them so that they can then experience the CPM up at the middle school. And both actually Andrew and I took a trip up to the middle school to really observe what does that look like to make sure that we are doing alignment work to better support and prepare our students for that transition.
I have kind of a unique lens since I'm a gifted and talented teacher at STEM, and I get to really support the teachers through this process. So I get to see all grades K through 5 and the action kind of that happens in the classroom. It's pretty cool. But on the left side are kind of the skills that the curriculum really focuses on throughout grades K through 5. And what's really awesome about that is you go into a kindergarten classroom and they're working on their communication, and then you go into a 5th grade classroom and just how they're taking it and the progression from K to 5 with that particular skill. It's a really, really a cool thing to see. And then I know Cindy and I, we talked about this a lot, we got to interview some kids, but the engagement that this curriculum really has for these kids is they take it through an investigation at the beginning that's hands-on, and then at the end of the unit, there's a project that is a real life project. So all the work that they're doing that's hands-on really leads up to that project that they get to share with parents, and they all kind of celebrate that work together. So that's a really cool thing with engagement.
So here's like an example of one of the Think Deeply where the students are then doing output through either written or verbal and as they reflect on the lessons that they have been experiencing. So I have a quick video that kind of is a snapshot of what this curriculum looks like and some of the key components of the curriculum.
We would bring in like some objects for what we would have in our source, and then we would like
create equations that you can find the prices for each item.
yeah. So like you didn't know it at first, and then you need to solve algebra equations to figure out how much each item costs.
There would be like just, I don't know, 10 of those kind of around the room, and we'll take turns being sorted here and the others will try to move around them all.
The biggest part about MQ is that the kids have opportunities to collaborate and work together. And there's never just one answer, and that's kind of the best part about it, is that the kids are working together to solve to multiple solutions, and then they're really working on agreeing and disagreeing with each other.
There are opportunities for students to write out their answers and their thoughts in journal entries, and usually journal entries are what we do at the end of every lesson, which allows us to not only converse over what the students have been able to do in the class that day, but also write down and elaborate exact steps in order to get to their goal.
So that is our presentation. I'm going to open up if anybody has any questions at all for my team.
So thank you for being here. That was very interesting to see, and I love that we're starting all of this at such a young age, like from the start. My question is about the verbal and written math part and how that works for English language learners, because that's, if they're struggling with English, then does that kind of make math even more complex?
Someone want to answer that question?
I think the great opportunities that the curriculum provides for our students is very explicit understanding to take it beyond just the words that are being provided, but also the concepts and, for example, the shapes. Students, I've learned with the experience is that they have challenges, EL or not, with a lot of the academic language. And that, when it comes to math, is one of the biggest challenges when they approach a word that they might not know or a concept that might be foreign to them. And so I would say the biggest challenge that we have facing moving forward with the EL students is bridging that gap so that they understand that the challenges they're facing are the same as those of the gen ed. And my concept that I like to promote the most, as we saw in one of the last slides of the video, is the word wall that I have in my classroom. And at the 5th grade level, we're quite extensive with the academic language. In this unit alone, we have over 51 words for the students to learn. And I don't know if you can see the rings of note cards that I have in there, but call me a traditionalist. I like flashcards. But that's something that I want to ingrain into the students. I want them to understand that vocabulary within math is just as important. And especially for EL learners, they're facing that challenge with math as well. And so to give them the opportunity on assessments or checkups to have access to these words, it's giving them a lot more confidence. And that's something that I want to provide not only for the gen ed students, but also if we do have opportunities to have ELs, to teach them that as well.
Good answer, thank you.
I'm going to also piggyback off of, but one of the things that I think that is unique about the curriculum is it's actually having them do the experience first. So it's actually giving them the firsthand experience so that then they can translate it into the language and the output versus them having to generate the output without having the experience first. And in the curriculum, when we did the research on the curriculum, it talked a lot about the scaffolding and actually the experiences that do better support our EL students. So we were excited about that.
What has been your experience so far? So you made the comment that your focus isn't as much on accelerating as it is on getting a deeper understanding of the fundamentals. So that's, I think, a transition from what maybe has been a traditional kind of GP, where it was maybe all about acceleration. What has been your experience thus far with how that is received from parents who maybe have a different set of expectations?
I'll speak on my 2 cents and I don't know if someone else will want to chime in or not. So what I would say is I have an interesting lens being at the middle school and seeing our kids from a 6-8 lens. And what I would say is, yes, our kids have been able to go fast, but there have been some gaps in some of their understanding. And so I actually really appreciate this and then this model. Not saying we won't get to a point of acceleration, but right now when I look at the majority of our kids and where they're at, having them have complete depth of concepts and understanding of that is really where I think the needs of my students are right now. When we reached out to families and when we started talking about this, they've actually been really receptive of it, and they've responded saying they have also seen similar needs And so I think that has just been more affirmation at this point in time that we're going down the right path and where our students are right now. Not saying that we won't be in a different spot, but just when we assess our current needs, that's what I would say is what I've seen.
How many years do you have into your current model? I mean, is this the first year that you've introduced this, or do we have a couple years under our belt?
So we started it as a pilot last year.
Okay.
This is my first year that I went K-5.
So we'll have an opportunity, presumably, to follow these cohorts as they start getting into the middle school and high school.
Yep.
And watch how that pans out. Great.
And again, when we made a lot of our decisions this fall to identify students, we wanted to be as accurate or assess our student needs. And based upon what our screeners were, this was kind of where our students were at. And again, I'm not saying that we won't get to a point. My goal is that we can get to a point that kids, could accelerate. I'm just not seeing that right now from my lens.
My question is very similar, actually, but was wondering if you've heard things from students about how they experience this little bit of a shift. And I'm especially interested because, they don't necessarily know, oh, that's the name of the program and that's what the program's supposed to do. It's just, how does it feel to me? And does it feel different? Am I enjoying it? So I'm curious if you've seen or observed anything on that front.
So since I get to work with kind of all of the kids, but I'm thinking particularly the 2 5th grade students that we interviewed. I mean, we just asked them a few simple questions, but they were able to tell us that they loved that they got to think deeper into things, and they loved that they got to do writing and reading with math, so it kind of integrates all of that in there. And they did get really excited with the projects. I think every single grade, in 4th grade, they made board games, and they were so excited to share them with their parents and all over that they were doing. So I think the kids are really receptive to that, and they're able to tell the difference so far.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thanks again for being here. It's always so wonderful to get a deeper look into what's happening in each one of our schools, and especially just to be able to share some of the snippets of student work and the videos. It was wonderful too. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so as Ms. Winter gets the computer changed back over, I think it's a good time to do a brief review of snow and cold and the conversations that happened, just to have sort of that update. Just want to review what our protocols are, but then also just sort of walk the board through as a public group. What does it actually look like when we get into that conversation and look at what are we doing about the schools? So first off, as a reminder, the protocol is the decision is made in the morning approximately at 5 a.m. At the latest. And so that doesn't mean the decision is made at 5 a.m. That means that by 5 a.m. we are ready to announce that decision. We obviously leave ourselves at that time because there are things that can significantly change from a snowfall perspective. We also then, for after school, make that decision or announce that decision by 1:30 in terms of canceling after school activities. And similarly, we like to make decisions earlier when they're easy, but there are certainly times where that is challenging. And what we do is a multitude of different things. On Monday, for example, I got out and checked out the streets, wanted to see what kind of snowfall was out. Coordinating, there were phone calls with a wide range of superintendents across the metro area, and we're paying attention to what our colleague and neighbor districts are doing, and just trying to gather as much information as possible prior to making that decision to move forward with schools or to close schools. And one of the advantages of waiting, which is obviously a challenge because we want to know as early as possible, is forecasts change. So you get into the gray area of what do you do in terms of weather. And so we really take that seriously as we try to do that, but there are a wide range of variables around the weather. So for example, received an email today from the National Weather Service. So tonight it's expected to get down to 25 below wind chill. That isn't a temperature at which I would anticipate Richfield is closing schools, nor would I anticipate our neighbors to. And it does not expect to go significantly deeper than that. And so while I'll monitor this evening, I'm not expecting the cold to get to where it would be considered widely metro-wide dangerous. Round 1 of snow coming this week is planned from the National Weather Service to come approximately Tuesday evening. Snowfall accumulations of approximately 3 to 6 inches. we are predicted most likely to be in the 4 to 6 inch area. Typically, we have not canceled in a 4 to 6 inch snowfall, but some of that depends on timing and snow plows and things of that nature. Now, if you'll recall, last Wednesday, we actually in Richfield got, depending on where it was measured, 3.4 inches to 5 inches of snow. And so that became a challenge as we were trying to predict that, because at that time, the Weather Service had predicted somewhere between 3.5 and 12 inches of snow. And so a lot of districts made their decision by actually about 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock the night before. We actually had a no school day last Monday, and so we had our teachers come in 2 hours late. Snow across the metro closed a wide range of schools, but the prediction was not the 4 to 6 inches, it was more like 4 to 12. And so that obviously becomes challenging as you don't know what's it going to be. Then round 2 of snow is planned to come this week, Wednesday evening into Thursday morning. Here's where it's going to get a little bit more dicey, and the kind of thing that we'll be up late at night trying to figure it out. Widespread snowfall accumulations of 3 to 6 inches with a swath of 6+ inches possible. As of right now, we're in the 60 to 70% chance of more than 6 inches of snow. How many more than 6 inches? Well, we don't know. Then also the storm track can change because of this Monday evening, we're talking about 3 days later. And so even those few hours or those several hours make a pretty significant difference, but we monitor very closely and try to make sure that we're providing the safest possible environment for our students and our teachers and our staff, but also making sure that we prioritize having our kids in school. So we'll be watching this week similar to what we always do, and if there are decisions to make, we'll be making those as early as possible.
Thank you for that update. Any questions about how those decisions are made and when they are made?
I have one. It's come up a few times. People do ask if Richfield is a district that would entertain a 2-hour delay on student contact days. I know we did Monday for the staff development day. That introduces a lot of logistical challenges, sometimes more so than a full cancellation.
So from a technical perspective, we could do a 2-hour late start. If our well, there's a couple of caveats to that. One, we have our Richfield buses, but we also subcontract with several others. So if we made a 2-hour late start decision, we would have to coordinate with all of our busing subcontractors, which would mean that the districts that are served by multiple units would all have to go on a 2-hour late start. The reason we have not used it in the past, and typically districts with higher percentages of poverty or higher percentage of ELL students don't do that, is you're typically going 2 hours late because of the safety of the roads and or the safety of students. And so if we think about who is least likely to get that message, we deliver our messages in English and Spanish. And so people who do answer their phone would get the message, but if somebody isn't able to answer the phone, they wouldn't get that message. And if their home language is not English or Spanish, we actually don't send out that message. And so a 2-hour late start in that situation might confuse families more significantly with that language barrier, leaving some kids out by the bus, which is kind of why we try to close schools if we need to. And so we have hesitated against that, and that is actually, as I checked around with other superintendents, not a typical practice of the more diverse districts across the metro.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
Teaching in an urban setting, there's a lot of things that families may not know, and there's a lot of frustration when you have to close school because there's logistics about. But as you say, the waiting for the bus and walking to and from the bus, where a bus may be late, that's where the real danger is. And I don't think that we think about collectively enough about that. The danger of a child waiting in a corner 5 to 10 minutes in certain low temperatures, and also the fact that a lot of lower income families, their winter gear may not be appropriate, and sometimes for children who do have the gear, if they're left alone at home to get dressed, for the older, they may, I see it every day, like, where's your coat? I know you have a coat, put it on, and they're like, oh, I don't want to, or they feel that outside's gonna be as warm as it is inside and things like that. So I know it's frustrating, but I appreciate that we have been considering all of those safety issues, because ultimately, our children's health and this was really important at the end.
Tuesday and Wednesday we closed for sure because of the cold weather and the wind chills. On Thursday, it was actually, it was 25 below. There was no significant wind on Thursday, and that was above the barrier that some of our neighboring districts used to close. However, at that temperature, of actual temperature, many of the buses would not necessarily start or run, obviously making that an even greater danger. And so we take all of those factors into account and definitely don't want to put any of our students at risk as we make some of those difficult decisions.
I noticed really that all of the notifications came out the day before, and I think in a very timely fashion. I think that really is helpful to families. So.
I think, as I said, when there is an easy decision to make, and it's clearly going to be 50, 60 below wind chill, we can make that one the night before with no problem. Part of the reason I went through this week's forecast is that there are snows that are probably not cancellation, but if they end up shifting track, for example, or shifting track at the last minute or changing by a couple of hours, we could have that 4 to 6 to 6 plus come between midnight and 4 a.m., which would make it very different than it might look at 8 or 9 o'clock the night before, which is why, again, we get out on the streets and we take a look and we see how the city's doing and we see how much the snow came down. So,
do you have a set amount of snow to determine whether we have school or not? Like you say, it's got to be 7 inches or more.
we do not have a specific number because snow can be, obviously, as you know, very different. There's that light, the recent snow was very light and fluffy, and other snow can, like outside right now, there is no snow on the streets. However, they are much slipperier and more dangerous. So really, everything is going to end up as a condition-based event, and we'll have to decide based on those. So tough enough to say. It's going to each time it's going to be that individual situation, and we're going to examine it and do the best we can by collaborating and examining the safety for our students and our staff.
I would add, during my time as chair, I learned about how good the communication is between Superintendent Yanowski and the city, and they are all communicating about when the flowers are going to be out, if they're going to be pulled, and then the snow will just continue to accumulate. So there's a lot of background communication that goes on to make sure that we're involved in this.
I mean, I feel like our public works department at the city is second to none in what they do and how quickly they do it. But also knowing a lot of people are traveling across city lines to get to and from school, whether it's students or staff. So being mindful of that as well. And then the one other thing, since we're talking about this, is there have been stories about a number of districts who are now at risk of falling under the threshold of the mandated hours of instruction per year that's set out at the state statute. And so I think it's also good to reassure everybody that we are not close to that threshold at this point in time as a district. And so obviously, if there are more unexpected cancellations, we certainly will revisit that, but we are not currently as a district at risk of falling short of that state requirement.
Correct. According to statute, elementary students need 935 or more instructional hours, and secondary students 1,020. And so our calendar committee works hard with our staff to create a calendar that supports that. We've taken multiple steps to make sure that, barring knock on wood, multiple weather level events across multiple days in a year, we should still remain safe within those days and within the state statutes. And are similar to, I actually was texting back and forth with 12 superintendents this evening, and there's only 1 or 2 districts that are having a conversation about being really at that border and concerned. There are some that are right up against it. There are some that are just not concerned at this time. There is one that is considering having that.
Okay, I think we can move on to our commendations, and we have one wonderful recognition to share this evening.
Absolutely, and congratulations out to Richfield Middle School teacher Beth Johnson, receiving the 2019 Breaking Barriers Award by the Minnesota Coalition of Women in Athletic Leadership as part of the Minnesota Girls and Women in Sports Day. She is going to be honored later this week at their banquet on February 6th. She has dedicated her life, Beth Johnson, to giving boys and girls all ages an opportunity to compete and excel at all sports levels. She was a 3-sport athlete at Matamita High School and a 3-time track and field state champion. Played basketball at Bethel, where she received her math teaching degree, a profession she chose so she could make a difference in the lives of young people. She's been with Richfield Public Schools since 2000, serving as the boys and girls hurdle coach at the high school and was an assistant basketball coach for 10 years. Beth Johnson works at basketball camps, coaches traveling basketball, and serves as the school's middle school intramural athletics director. In her free time, she also competes in various basketball and flag football leagues. So congratulations and thank you for your service to Beth Johnson.
Great honor. The next item is approval of the consent agenda. As always, if there is an item that any board member would like to remove, that can be requested at this time. Otherwise, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda by Mr. Paulus and a second by Mr. Ashmead. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the consent agenda is approved. We have no old business this evening, so we'll move directly into the new business section of the agenda, where we have a first read of one existing school policy. We are going to revisit the resolution that we passed at our last meeting and also gratefully receive 2 donations made to the district.
All right, so student dress and appearance, and this is just a first read of our current policy with some of the projected changes built in from the Safe and Supportive Schools Committee. The Safe and Supportive Schools group had significant amounts of student feedback. You can imagine that in a dress code policy, there is a lot of conversation about what is appropriate language to use in regard to appropriate clothing. And so you will notice, general statement of the policy is to look for appropriate clothing and appropriate dress. And students and the team at Safe and Supportive Schools came up with wording that says covers all undergarments and or completely covers private parts, both in the appropriate and inappropriate, removing other language that might also not be in line with our gender neutral or gender inclusion policy. Similarly, working their way through, changing the language to bring it updated into what is in line with new and current law, and being able to take a look at that policy. Guideline to follow then also is specific to Richfield dual language, and most of the work with the dual language school, which has chosen through their community to have a school uniform, was to also change that to be in line with our gender inclusion policy so that there aren't separate expectations and requirements for who can wear what, but one set of uniform options for all of the students enrolled at Richfield Dual Language School. So again, this is a first read, taking input from board members, but also know that this will undergo some pretty significant, some additional review and go back to the Safe and Supportive Schools before coming back here.
I do have a question. This is on the second page. This is C, it's section C. No, I'm sorry, section D.
Yes.
It's about hats.
Yes.
So I guess that what I was wondering about is, is there a distinction between a hat and a head covering? So I'm thinking about headscarves, that sort of thing. Certainly, other language in the policy would indicate that, a hijab and so forth is not intended to be covered by this, but I just didn't know if we needed to define that differently. Go ahead.
So that is an excellent question, and I said guaranteed the board would have some feedback on this, and it was Crystal, you were there for part of this conversation, and with the administrators, hats were the most talked about piece of the policy. It does not include headgear that is for religious reasons or cultural reasons. However, defining what constitutes a hat it has had a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
And so the desire is, so we've even had the conversation about hoodies. And so, looking for some guidance from the board regarding that. There's not,
Yeah, so let me ask the question then. I certainly as a student, when I was in high school and younger, hats weren't allowed, I can certainly recall that. However, the question would be, what is the educational purpose of the prohibition on hats?
so there was a couple pieces of conversation that I can share. One, students did not feel the restriction for hats was necessary. And I think that was pretty, because of the lack of clarity. Principals administration had more strong feelings because of how students were, the ability to, it becomes almost a toy, like kids can take it off, it's a distraction in class. They also feel like in most workplaces, the ability to wear a hat is not typical, and so moving forward and preparing students, it can also, depending upon having that conversation about hoodies or different types of headgear, especially the hoodies, they can, when kids have earbuds in, or they can hide their faces. So, and Ed Richfield, because that's who else we also gathered some information from. The Ed Richfield felt like the hats with the bills, so I'm gonna call them a baseball cap because that's what I'm most familiar with. They felt like that had already run its course, and that practices for not having kids wear baseball caps in school was no longer a battle, so why open it up again and have that discussion again. So, I mean, I can quite honestly say it was across the board.
Yeah.
And so,
I wonder if there would be value in outlining some of those characteristics of if we want to use the term head covering, but it sounds like we're talking about things that obstruct your vision and that obstruct your hearing or obstruct your ability to interact. Sort of that face-to-face interaction.
okay.
And then it sounds like we're talking about things that are potential distractions in the classroom. I mean, I don't know. I mean, would that be helpful to
We can
kind of clarify what the educational purpose is on that?
absolutely. And I go back and we have another meeting on Thursday morning and tomorrow afternoon with the students. So this is for, we can take that back to clarify educational purposes and feedback from the board for needing more clarity around why we would restrict.
And we certainly imply in the next section, section E, that we do not intend to infringe upon the rights of students to express political religions, etc. But we may want to specifically state that we're specifically excluding culturally or religiously headgear that is culturally or of cultural or religious significance to the student.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
I know that I'm not part of the board, but we also restricted it when I used to work in mental health, because teens would use it to withdraw
Yeah.
from,
So once again, it's that obstruction of.
they'd use it to
Yeah.
withdraw from the group.
Yep,
and
so that
hide.
makes sense.
I was just going to share, I was, as Mary alluded to, I was there for the first conversation, which was in this room with, it was about 20 high school students, I believe, and it was, I mean, just a very lively, as you can imagine, great conversation where the students themselves had a range of opinions about, I would say, the current policy and how it's being implemented, and I think asked some really good questions, because I think as we begin to wade into this, it's what the policy is, and it's also the consistency and the clarity with which it is communicated, and that students sort of feel like it is, being applied fairly. So it goes just beyond the policy and the guidelines, but it's also then what are in student handbooks. And I think that there were some interesting points raised where it felt like there were inconsistencies with the handbook and the policy and the guidelines. So I'm grateful that the students are so involved in this, and then also grateful that there's the second version of the Safe and Supportive Schools group, which is many staff and family members that are going to be meeting next week to continue talking about this. So I think this is one that raises a lot of questions, and I think we should be really thoughtful about what we put into policy and changes that we do and do not make. So I'm glad that we will be taking the appropriate amount of time to do that.
Just know, the elementary level, I have students who cover their hair because they don't like how their mom braided their hair because now they're old. And I also have students who wear winter hats because they're cold. And I feel bad telling the kid, take your beanie or whatever off your, so it's like a lot of it case by case. But I think the ability to see and be seen is what's really
It's valid.
to keep them from withdrawing, from checking out, from having conversations that no one else other than the person next to them knows about. And I think the cultural piece added to the section E would be helpful, where it's political, religious, philosophical, just adding that word.
I would actually prefer to see religious or cultural observance separate from section E. I think lumping it in with some of the others, message, it's not warned for necessarily messaging in that instance, it's warned under observance. So.
And be pulled out. And what do you think about this?
About the hat road?
Or just any of it.
From my understanding, anytime I've talked to a principal or anybody like administration about hats, their arguments about it is more of kind of like a social, social viewpoint of like how it was being brought up about seeing face to face and like identification and knowing who's who, which I think is a very valid argument. But there, having said that, it does seem like a lot of the arguments that are made of whether or not we should or should not have hats is due to an abuse of it or anything such as that. So, in that regards, then you could make the same argument with phones, like anti-phones in school at all, like they can't be seen at all. I feel like because phones can be abused or they could be used, just to be used, such as hats. There's hats that I could wear a cap and you can see my face and we can have a conversation and that, or there's kids who maybe will hold it down or wear a hood to cover up fully. So it's in that case, then you could be asked to remove your hat. Like I said, or was being brought up, I think the wording of it has a significant influence on it of how it can be used. I know other schools don't do hats, and I know for a while there was a lot of talk of gangs, affiliation with it, which students bring up a lot. That was 20 years ago, and it's not what they use it for anymore. So I personally don't think hats should be banned from school. There, having said that, if they're used to disadvantage of learning, was being brought up, you were asking what's the association with the learning disadvantage of it, and it's I don't think there is one. It's more of a kind of that social concept or that culture of it, authority, and the people who are under, say, hey, I need to be able to look at you and comfortably communicate with you. And so I don't feel like they should be banned unless if they're used to that point in a negative way, which if anything. And for the whole, for the hijab, I mean, yeah, that's, if you have a, religious purpose or not fully, I'm Muslim myself. I fully believe, Muslims and Muslim women should be able to cover themselves because that's not a cultural right that we have, it's a religious right. It's not just, a specific, group of people who just happen to be of that religion. It's anyone who follows that faith has to follow that right.
Thank you, this year.
So I had a conversation at home about kids also, and the concern that was brought up to me was what you had already mentioned about consistency and implementation. So do you think like guidelines would be an appropriate addition to this, or do you think that's going?
I think the policy has a lot of the information that would be in guidelines. I think the next step of it is to align handbooks, but then also to train both administrators and teachers to implement all of the policies. I think one of the things that is always a challenge is to implement policy and procedure consistently. I recall that when I was a principal, we had literally 6 weeks of conversation about gum chewing in our middle school. Something that I personally didn't care about, but we had teachers who felt very strongly. And as the administrator at the time, what I said was, you will have a rule and that will be what we will all 100% enforce. We will all either allow gum or we will not allow gum. And it took the teachers 6 weeks to come to that agreement. Here, when we have policies, what we need to do is we need to acknowledge we have an agreement, and so it is expected that we are all implementing that agreement. One of the biggest challenges in that is that people like to look the other way. They might want to be the person who doesn't notice, or maybe they say they don't notice, or they might want to be the nice person. And what happens is that until it's explained to people that if we don't have policies that we all follow, we're actually disadvantaging one another. Somebody gets to be the good, nice teacher, and somebody has to be the bad, mean teacher. And until we really get that across all of our training and have everybody implement things consistently, then we're going to have students and or adults saying that we have policies that we're just not following equally, or people are subject to different treatment. And I think as leaders, as the board and as administration, we've been clear that that's not the system we want to have. So that's about training, and that's about systems of expectations and systems of accountability for all of our team members. Something we're committed to.
Lots more to come on this.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So next we have a resolution before the board to designate polling places for 2019 elections. This is an updated version of the resolution passed at our last meeting, as there was information missing from that document. Would you like to provide a brief overview
I
before
would
we take
absolutely
action?
be happy to explain. So this is a document actually prepared for us in partnership with the city, who actually hosts the polling, but we are the location of the polling places, and as a school district, we are required to pass this. I believe the one we passed previously was actually based on the previous election and did not include polling places for people who physically live outside of the city of Richfield. And so as all of us know, Richfield school boundaries are different than Richfield city boundaries. And since there wasn't a school election that was connected to the last list, this includes in Richfield Ward 1, Precinct 3, the sections of Edina that are Richfield Public Schools, and this also adds in Ward 3, Precinct 1, Fort Snelling, which are both areas for whom they do vote, not necessarily in the city council election, but they do vote in the school board-based elections, which are something that's important to us.
So the updated version does cover all possible and likely elections for the year 2019.
Absolutely.
Great. Any other questions before we take action? Okay. This is a resolution, so we first need a motion to approve the resolution and a second before I pull the board.
And we'll approve the resolution.
Thank you.
I will second.
Great. So we have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Mr. Tensing. Any discussion? Excuse me. So as it is a resolution, I will pull the board. Ms. Cole? Aye. Mr. Tensing?
Aye.
Mr. Ashmead?
Aye.
Mr. Paulus?
Aye.
Ms. Malik? Aye. The chair votes aye and the resolution passes. The last item in the new business section of the agenda is to review donations that have been made to the district, and we are fortunate to have several this evening.
Absolutely. So Realtor Terry Alstrom donated $80 to the Richfield High School Spartan Food Shows. We're thankful for Realtor Terry Alstrom. And also Realtor Denise Marie Perhay donated $50 to the Richfield High School Spartan Food Show also. So we are thankful for Realtor Denise Marie.
I will move that we accept these donations with gratitude.
I'll second it.
We have a motion to approve the donations by Mr. Tensing and a second by Mr. Ashmead. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the donations are accepted with gratitude. So we are moving into the advanced planning section of the agenda, which as always begins with a legislative update. Are there any updates, comments, or questions related to our legislative work?
A couple of quick things. Obviously, we're in the calm before the storm, as we're still a couple weeks out from the governor sharing his first draft of the statewide budget, and so that'll be coming up in a couple of weeks. But more on the local level, as we talked about with our polling places. As of tomorrow, the in-person directly dropping your ballot opens at City Hall for the City Council Ward 3 election. And then the full election occurs on Tuesday, February 12th. And so that will be coming up for City Council Ward 3 special election.
The one thing I was going to share is, I think it was maybe just a day or two after our last meeting, myself, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Roby, and our 2 student board members, so Nasir as well as Diego Luis, met with a staff member from Representative Ilhan Omar's office, who works on education for our representative to discuss our district and some of our biggest needs. And I thought it was a really interesting conversation, and he commented several times that we were the only district to include students in that conversation. And I would say for me, it was a highlight to be able to hear you, Nasir, and Diego Luis talk with Matthew about your experiences and the things that are on your mind as current high school students. So just want to, again, publicly thank you for that, as well as just appreciating Representative Omar for making this a priority in her first month in office and getting in touch with us proactively and asking to set up this meeting, especially given that she sits on the Education Committee in the House of Representatives. So I don't know if there's anything that you would want to share from that since you were there, but.
The thanks is all due to Dr. Yanowski for the invitation. So I just showed up and
Well,
That's all I need was.
So I gotta deflect the credit back to Nasir to say, so we have some very well-spoken, impressive students, so I'm excited to have them take part in things. So I'm gonna double down on that and just add that we also are hosting the State of the Community and State of the City address by Mayor Maria Regan Gonzalez. And anticipated speakers, because we will be taking the stage for a short period of time. So in addition to Board Chair Brecky and myself and hosting Principal Dr. Carla Hines, I do anticipate both Diego and Nasir, if available, to be on the stage to also share as part of our presentation because it's an exciting opportunity to have such strong, well-spoken students and to give them that opportunity. Makes me proud.
So mark your calendars. The State of the Community event will be on February 20th at the middle school at 5:30 p.m. So it'll be great to have a large turnout there. And it was also just announced that Representative Omar will be attending that gathering.
Yes, we believe so.
Tentatively. I'm sure if things in DC happen,
with you all, but then there was a shutdown in DC. And so
I put in a word for assistant to make that meeting wasn't good enough. And we will be expecting to see her in person and have another one.
I can confirm that exchange took place.
And I also said we were also at fault because superintendent was also not there. So we kind of were at equal.
We're gonna make it happen.
You know, so we can't.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
I'll be there on the 20th.
Got you.
I got you.
Any final legislative update items? If not, we can transition to information and/or questions from the board.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. One of our citizens asked me if we had changed anything on the website. She says it seems much more aware of what's going on, and she appreciates particularly the visuals that have been posted. So people are noticing.
Yeah, that's good. Yes, we have, our communication and marketing work is definitely one of those areas of focus. We continue to spread on the net our presence, both through our website and our Facebook page, which has jumped again since the last time we talked, up to about 1,182 people following. So we just continue to try to communicate more effectively the work that we're doing in Richfield Public Schools. Thank you.
Okay, our next meeting will take place on Tuesday, February 19th, due to the President's holiday on Monday the 18th, and we'll begin with time for public comment and also include a presentation by our American Indian Education team. The first meeting in March will be on Monday, March 4th, and feature a presentation from our high school and community education teams. At this point, though, of course, things are tentative and may be shuffled as we get closer to the dates. Are there any items that board members would like to request for discussion at a future meeting?
I would be interested in hearing about the progress of Policy 979, community use of school facilities and grounds. It's been kind of tabled for a while. I know it went back to the extracurricular committee. I know I've heard from a couple of groups that are intending to plan their fees and things like that for students. And if there are going to be changes, as much notice is protected.
Yes, and Chair Brackey and I met with Mayor Regan Gonzalez and new city manager Katie Rodriguez. And so we feel pretty positive about the direction of our ongoing partnership. And so one of the main thing holding things up, we've sort of cleared that hurdle. So we'll go back to examining that, and I anticipate bringing that back to, I believe, extracurricular advisory meets next week. We should be ready to bring that back to the board for another read, maybe not passage, but just sort of a review again, since it's been tabled for about 6 months prior to us moving forward.
Anything else? Okay, we have now reached the stage in which we could entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I have a comment. If I am a parent that has kids in that program you ask questions about, do you want a parent comment?
If we can take that after we officially adjourn, that would be great. I'll come talk to you. Thank you.
I can give it to you. If any of you really want it, I can give it to you.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. I'll second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Mr. Tensing. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the meeting is adjourned at 8:04 p.m.